picture this. You're looking at a massive commercial dock in Colombo, Sri Lanka.
Okay.
Sitting there, just baking in the midday sun, are 1,000 giant shipping containers.
1,000. Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, 1,000. And they are packed to the brim with urgently needed food. The people in the city are desperate.
Right, because the food inside those containers is literally beginning to rot.
Exactly. But the shippers, they absolutely refuse to release a single crate to the buyers.
Wait, why? Is it because they don't have the money to pay for it?
No, I mean, they have millions of Sri Lankan rupees, but the local currency has just completely collapsed. The global suppliers simply refuse to accept it.
Oh, because they only want one thing. Right. US dollars.
Right. Without them, the international banking software literally cannot process the transaction. No dollars, no food.
Which really, it forces you to stop and ask a pretty terrifying paradoxical question.
Yeah.
If a massive life-threatening crisis thousands of miles away can be caused simply by a lack of US dollars, what exactly happens to the rest of the world if the government that prints those dollars suddenly collapses, or defaults on its debt, or, loses its superpower status?
Welcome to the Missing Lessons, where we explain what school never did.
We hear phrases like the national debt and global superpowers thrown around on the news every single day.
Every day, yeah.
Yeah.
But school never actually teaches us how incredibly fragile this entire system is. So today, we are doing a deep dive into the domino effect of a U.S. collapse.
And we aren't just looking at the statistics, right?
No, definitely not. We're going to look at the underlying mechanics, exactly why a crisis in Washington directly impacts, your future job, your savings, and the price of literally everything you buy.
Because it is all connected. But the way it connects isn't just about lines on a graph. It's about how the entire operating system of the modern world functions.
Exactly. But before we jump into those mechanics, if you're enjoying the Missing Lessons, make sure to follow the podcast, leave a rating, and share it with someone who might find it interesting. It helps us create more episodes and reach more curious minds.
Awesome. So let's unpack this.
Yeah. To understand how the system collapses, you have to first understand how the U.S. actually stays on top.
Right. The foundation.
Yeah, there's this foundational mechanism protecting the American economy. And economists call it the exorbitant privilege. Because the U.S. dollar is the global reserve currency, the U.S. gets this unique superpower.
Okay, but let's clarify how that actually works in the real world.
Sure.
Why does a farmer in Brazil who's selling grain to a buyer in Sri Lanka care about a piece of paper printed in Washington? Why not just trade directly?
It really comes down to the plumbing of the global financial system. The U.S. dollar isn't just money. It is essentially the iOS of global trade.
The operating system.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you want to use the Global Trade App Store, you have to use their operating system. Globally, the U.S. dollar makes up about 58% of all central bank reserves.
That is massive.
It is. And if you look at trade in the Americas, 96% of it is invoiced in dollars.
96%. Wow.
Yeah. In Asia, it's over 70%. So if that Brazilian farmer wants to guarantee that the money he receives can be used to buy, say, tractors from Germany, he needs a currency everyone trusts.
And because everyone needs dollars to do business, everyone wants to hold on to dollars.
Right. So because the rest of the world is desperate for a currency just to keep their own lights on, we get this massive financial buffer.
So we basically get to run up our national credit card because everyone else needs our specific brand of plastic.
That is a perfect way to look at it. That global demand allows the United States to borrow almost unimaginable amounts of money at incredibly low interest rates.
Through treasury bonds, right?
Yes, the U.S. government issues debt, which are treasury bonds. They're basically government IOUs. And the rest of the world buys them up because they are viewed as the absolute safest asset on Earth.
And that cheap borrowing is the hidden engine that funds the massive U.S. military and, our domestic welfare programs.
Exactly. Have you ever noticed how the U.S. can run massive deficits year after year without the immediate consequences that would just absolutely crush a smaller country?
Yeah, people ask that all the time. But here is where the logic hits a wall, I think. Leverage only works as long as the underlying foundation is growing. What happens when the math starts working against you?
Well, the foundation is already fracturing. Back in the year 2000, the U.S. economy made up about 20% of the total global economy.
Okay.
Today, that share has shrunk to about 15%. Meanwhile, U.S. net foreign liabilities, which is the debt we owe to the rest of the world minus what they owe us, has skyrocketed
How high?
to about 70% of our total gross domestic product.
Wow, 70%.
Yeah, we are borrowing more heavily than ever before, but our relative slice of the global economic pie is shrinking.
So the operating system is taking on too much debt, and the hardware just can't keep up.
Precisely. Which brings us to the actual breaking point. We hear about these long-term trends constantly, but a collapse isn't usually a slow fade.
Right, there has to be an immediate trigger. If things are this over-leveraged, what happens when the government simply stops paying its bills?
That is the first real domino. A debt default and a sudden, violent economic crash. Every so often, the U.S. government hits a legal borrowing limit.
The debt ceiling.
Right. Since 1960, Congress has raised, revised, or extended that borrowing cap 78 times. It is usually just a routine political procedure.
But if political gridlock entirely prevents the government from raising that limit, the U.S. defaults.
Yes, the Treasury literally runs out of cash to pay its daily obligations.
Wait, hold on. Let's make this concrete for a second. If the government misses a payment, why does the local bank down the street suddenly stop lending to a small business?
Mm.
Why would a political standoff in Washington wipe out local jobs? That feels like a massive leap.
It does, but it happens because U.S. Treasury bonds act as the bedrock of the entire financial system. Think of them as the ultimate collateral.
Okay, collateral.
Every night, banks use these Treasury bonds to secure short-term loans with each other, ensuring that things like corporate payrolls clear the next morning.
Ah, I see.
If the U.S. defaults, that bedrock crumbles. Suddenly, a Treasury bond isn't a safe asset, it's a toxic one.
So the banks immediately panic.
Right. They stop lending to everyone because they don't know who is holding bad collateral. The credit market freezes overnight.
And without credit, businesses can't make payroll.
Exactly. They start firing people immediately. Even a short default, like just one single week, would freeze the economy so fast it would wipe out roughly 1.5 million jobs.
Just a week. And
Yeah.
if it drags on, say a standoff that lasts into the summer.
It becomes apocalyptic for the everyday person. We are talking about 7.8 million jobs vanishing in a matter of months.
7.8 million, that's terrifying.
The unemployment rate would skyrocket from around 3.4% to 8%. The stock market would crash, completely erasing $10 trillion in household wealth.
$10 trillion, just gone.
Just gone. Everyday payments stop. Government contractors don't get paid.
Yeah.
Retirees who rely on Social Security check their bank accounts, and there's nothing there.
Veterans' benefits halt immediately, too.
Yes, all of it.
But let's address a major misconception here. I always hear that a strong dollar hurts American manufacturing because it makes our exports too expensive.
Right, you hear that a lot.
So wouldn't the dollar collapsing actually help bring jobs back? Why is a collapsing dollar suddenly our biggest nightmare?
Because you have to look at what we actually consume. Normally, that exorbitant privilege we talked about gives you incredible purchasing power. It means that imported goods, the electronics, the smartphones, the clothing, the raw materials you buy every day, are artificially cheap for American consumers.
Right, because our money is so strong.
Exactly. But if the U.S. defaults and trust in the system shatters, the value of the dollar plummets. When the dollar loses value, the cost of all those imported goods soars.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Suddenly, your grocery bill, your electronics, and your basic necessities cost double or triple. And this is right at the exact moment when the job market is collapsing and wealth is evaporating.
So it is inflation on steroids combined with mass unemployment.
Precisely. It's the worst case scenario.
So if we are suddenly paying triple for imported electronics and basic goods just to keep the domestic economy breathing, how do we possibly keep paying for military bases in 80 different countries?
We can't. And that is the geopolitical vacuum. The economic collapse immediately bleeds into physical vulnerability.
Because the military runs on that same borrowed money.
Right. The U.S. military budget is massive. It's sitting at over $800 billion. But it's getting squeezed hard by the interest payments on the national debt.
Which keep going up.
Yeah. If current trends continue, publicly held debt could exceed 200% of GDP by 2050. The interest payments alone will consume such massive portions of the federal budget that policymakers will be forced to make impossible choices.
Basically, you cannot fund global defense if you can't even afford domestic social programs.
Exactly.
Okay, let me push back on that because people always bring up the sheer scale of the budget. We spend more on our military than the next 10 countries combined.
Sure.
On paper. Even if we have to make cuts, surely we have an enormous buffer before we actually lose superiority, right?
It looks that way if you just stare at a spreadsheet. But you have to understand the mechanism of purchasing power parity.
What is that?
This is about what a dollar actually buys in the real world. Think about it. Paying a top-tier software engineer at an American defense contractor might cost, say, $150,000 a year.
At least.
Right. But paying a brilliant engineer in China or Russia costs a fraction of that. A missile built in the U.S. carries massive labor, environmental, and administrative cost.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah. So when you adjust for local costs, the combined military spending of strategic rivals actually outstrips the United States.
They are getting far more physical hardware and manpower for every dollar equivalent they spend.
Exactly.
And that is assuming we can even get the materials to build the hardware in the first place, right?
Yes, which is a
Yeah.
massive assumption. You can't just throw money at a problem if you don't control the physical supply chains.
Like rare earth materials.
Exactly. These are the crucial elements, like neodymium, needed to build the magnets in advanced fighter jets, precision missiles, and secure communications tech.
And China controls, what, a huge portion of that?
Roughly 85% of the world's refined rare earth materials. And it's not just about mining them either.
What else is it?
It's the incredibly toxic, complex processing that the U.S. outsourced decades ago to save money. If a geopolitical crisis hits and those supply chains are severed, the U.S. simply cannot manufacture its way out of the problem.
You can't use an AI algorithm to magically print physical materials you don't possess.
Exactly.
So, faced with a crushing debt burden, a collapsing currency, an incredibly expensive military, and compromised supply chains, the U.S. is fundamentally forced to pull back.
Yes, there's no other option.
It has to choose domestic survival over global policing.
Yes. And when a superpower steps back, they leave a massive power vacuum.
Yeah.
Someone else always steps in.
Right, nature abhors a vacuum.
Exactly. Regional powers like China, the European Union, or India would immediately begin rewriting the rules of global trade and security to favor their own interests.
Which brings down the entire architecture of how the world has worked for the last 80 years.
Yes, since 1945, the world has operated under a U.S.-led, rules-based international order. That order isn't just some, abstract concept.
It's physical reality.
It is what guarantees freedom of navigation on the oceans. The U.S. Navy essentially subsidizes global trade by keeping sea lanes open and safe, which makes shipping insurance cheap.
It discourages countries from conquering their neighbors.
Right, and it provides a relatively stable environment for global commerce. If the U.S. military is no longer acting as the global police force, that entire system fractures.
And we don't even have to guess what that looks like. We are already seeing glimpses of it in real time.
Oh, absolutely. Just look at the recent surge in attacks on shipping lanes in the Red Sea. Without a dominant, unchallenged naval power keeping the peace, global trade routes become incredibly dangerous.
Which means insurance premiums for cargo ships skyrocket.
Yes, and those costs are immediately passed down to you, the consumer. We would see a rise in territorial conquests, and the world would divide into fragmented, isolated trading blocks.
How bad would that be economically?
Some estimates suggest that this kind of global economic fragmentation could reduce total global economic output by up to 7%.
7% of the whole world's GDP.
Yes, that is a devastating drop in human prosperity, meaning fewer jobs, less innovation, and more poverty worldwide.
Let me play devil's advocate here and ask the ultimate what-if question. We've talked about fragmentation and economic squeezes,
Okay.
but what if it's not just a slow decline? What if the government totally collapses into anarchy? What happens to the digits in our bank accounts then?
Well, if the system completely breaks down into total institutional collapse, money, as we know it, simply ceases to exist.
Just gone.
Yeah, those digits in your bank account and even the paper dollars in your wallet become entirely worthless. People often think they'll trade gold or cryptocurrency in a true collapse, but think about the mechanics of survival.
Right, you can't eat gold.
Exactly. If supply chains freeze and supermarkets empty out, gold is useless. You can't plug a server in to verify a crypto transaction if the power grid goes down.
So what becomes the currency?
The currency reverts to survival goods: salt, clean water, canned food, antibiotics, ammunition.
The real essentials.
Yet those physical necessities become the only means to purchase what you need. It sounds like a Hollywood action movie plot, but it is the stark reality of how fiat currency actually functions.
Because it only works because of the institutional trust backing it up.
Right. The moment the trust evaporates, the illusion of wealth disappears.
Which brings this massive, global, terrifying topic right back down to the individual listener. Have you ever noticed how dependent we are on the dollar in your own life?
It's everywhere.
Which of these explanations do you find most convincing? The slow economic squeeze of a default or the sudden geopolitical vacuum?
Honestly, regardless of exactly how the dominoes fall, the impact on a 16 to 25-year-old listening right now is profound.
Yeah, completely life-altering.
Let's say you're in college or you're just starting your career. If the U.S. collapses economically, that dream job you were banking on, it vanishes into an 8% unemployment void.
Because businesses simply can't get the overnight collateral loans they need to hire new people.
Exactly. And that new smartphone you want to buy, it suddenly doubles in price because the U.S. dollar no longer commands cheap imports from overseas factories.
And your family's retirement savings, the money your parents have worked decades to build.
It just evaporates in a $10 trillion market wipeout.
The big picture here is that you're living through a pivotal moment in human history.
Yeah, we really are.
We are potentially witnessing the end of a historical golden age of stability that started at the end of World War II. It's a fundamental shift where the rules of technology, trade, and safety are being completely rewritten by new global players.
So what does this all actually mean for you? How can you become future-proof in a world that is shifting under your feet?
That's the real question.
First, you need to rethink traditional career advice. Don't just diversify your skills. You need to look at the vulnerabilities of the industry you are entering.
What do you mean by that?
In a fragmented, volatile economy, a job that manages physical, local resources, like local energy grids, domestic agriculture, or local logistics, might suddenly become much safer than a high-paying tech job that relies entirely on international microchips from Taiwan.
So you have to look at the supply chain of your own career.
Exactly. And second, you really need to prioritize real financial literacy.
Right. Understand global economics.
Yes. Knowing the mechanics of how inflation works, how interest rates affect borrowing, and how clearinghouses operate is your absolute best defense against systemic collapse.
Don't just save money. Understand what your money actually represents.
Exactly.
And finally, keep an eye on global alliances. Knowing where your products come from, where the microchips in your car or the rare earths in your phone are actually mined and refined, makes you a smarter consumer and a much more valuable worker.
Yeah, you'll see the trends before they ever hit the mainstream news.
Yeah. Here's a question for you. If the US dollar was no longer the world's main currency, which currency or system do you think would take its place? Let us know your thoughts in the comments.
We read them all, and it really helps drive these deep dives.
Definitely.
So, to summarize the mechanics we've unpacked today, a U.S. collapse isn't just an abstract theory. It's a very real economic domino effect.
It starts with out-of-control debt and political gridlock.
Right. That triggers a default, which shatters the bedrock of the treasury market, freezes the global economy, wipes out wealth, and skyrockets unemployment.
And that financial squeeze forces a military pullback.
Yes, leaving a global power vacuum that ends with the U.S. losing its superpower status and the world fracturing into competing hostile trading blocs.
And here is the final thought to leave you with. History shows us that all great world orders, from the Romans to the British Empire, eventually come to an end.
They always do.
But they rarely die by murder from an outside force. They usually die by exhaustion or suicide from within. The question isn't just if it will happen to the American order, but whether we are watching the beginning of it right now.
If you enjoyed this episode of The Missing Lessons, don't forget to follow the podcast, leave a rating, and share it with a friend. Your support helps us continue exploring the topics school never taught us.